go live.
Right.
Okie dokes. Does the legal officer wish to make a statement at this stage?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. This is a brief reminder of procedures and behaviors during the meeting. Could you please make sure that your mobile phones and other devices are switched to silent if they are in close proximity to you? Everyone is responsible for managing their own microphone by keeping it muted, unless unmuting when invited to speak. This includes any roll call vote. Following the presentations and member discussion, members will be asked to vote on each item. The roll call vote is called alphabetically so to make it as smooth as possible, please could members be poised in readiness to be called and unmute your microphone before you vote, and then mute yourself again afterwards. You're only able to participate in the vote if you have been present at the meeting for the duration of that agenda item. That means by being able to hear and be heard by the chairman. If you should lose visual connection during the agenda item, you're still able to vote, but if you lose audio connection to the meeting, however briefly, for that agenda item, you should return a vote of abstain. There may be technical issues with connectivity that mean you leave the meeting unintentionally. Unfortunately, if this is the case, you will have to abstain on the item that you've missed part of. To re-enter the meeting, use the Zoom invite link. If a councillor has an interest and does not wish to participate in the meeting, the hosting officer will put them in the waiting room and return them to the meeting when the item is finished. Some members of the public are making representations by video recording, which will be played at the relevant time, and members of the public or parish council representatives wishing to participate in the meeting will be held in a waiting room by the host until it's their turn to speak. Should the chairman wish to adjourn the meeting at any time, they will advise that the meeting is to be adjourned and state what time the meeting will be reconvened. All participants are asked to remain in the meeting with their microphones muted. Finally, the meeting is live streamed and you will be seen and heard by members of the public, so it's important to behave professionally at all times. There may be a few seconds delay between the end of the meeting and when the live stream and recording are stopped. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, I remind everybody, this is a meeting in public. It is not a public meeting. Would the officers kindly introduce themselves to the public?
Hello, I'm Emma Parks, the head of Development Management and Building Control.
I'm Guy Everest, the Applications Team Leader.
Joy Ukadike, Legal Services.
And Liz DePauli from Democratic Services.
One more legal services to go. You unmute.
Samantha Whitlock from Legal Services.
Thank you very much. At our last council training meeting on planning, some questions were raised about procedures at the planning committees and other committees. May I point out to you, I'm sure most of you already read it extensively, but on page 3 and page 4 of your agenda, you have the guidance on planning committee procedure. It is useful to periodically probably go through those. It doesn't take out to the meeting. Page 5 and 6, you have the original recommendations to approve, blah blah blah. It's a fabulous chart. I love it to bits. You have to study it carefully because there is a lot there, but I think a study of that will reward you quite considerably in later months if you haven't already done so. Right, may we have apologies, please?
We've had apologies from Councillor Liz Kitchen.
Thank you very much. Item 2 minutes of the previous meeting. May I sign these as a true record?
No, can I raise a point?
Yes, certainly.
Under declaration, the minutes for the last meeting, under declarations of members' interests, I made the observation that I'd been advised by the monitoring officer that I had no interest that would prevent me speaking and voting on item 10. Now, I raised it because I think it's one of those situations where the public might reasonably think I did have an interest. And indeed, I've got another, depending on what happens to a case that's coming before, potentially coming before a future meeting, the same situation may arise. So I made it clear that on this occasion, I had sought the opinion of the monitoring officer and been advised that I was entitled to speak and vote. Now, I think that is something, I know it's not strictly speaking the declaration of an interest, it's the declaration of a no interest. But in terms of public information, I think it is useful if that comment by me at that time was recorded in the minutes. Thank you, Chairman.
Head of Development.
I have no issue with that being noted. Democratic Services, are you of the same view?
Yes, there's no, I'll add that to the minutes as a correction to the previous ones, yes.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
It's duly noted and will be added to the minutes. In
Thank
the
you, Chairman.
circumstances, may I sign the minutes? No further comments? Thank you very much. Thus, with your permission, I will sign the minutes at a later time and later place for reasons you will know. Maybe now go on to item 3, declarations of members' interest, and let me preempt. Councillor Circus, would you like to raise your declaration? Have you got it for this meeting or another?
No, Chairman. I was just saying that the situation that occurred at the last meeting is likely to occur at a future meeting, and therefore it's important that there should be a record where the public interest would dictate that people should know that we've cleared our position with the monitoring officer.
Okay, thank you very much then for that. That's fine. Do any members thus have declarations of interest for this meeting? I see no hands. I therefore presume there are no declarations from members for this meeting. I move on to item 4, announcements. As far as I know, there aren't any announcements unless something news comes to the officers. The head of development shake her head. Thank you very much. I now move on to item 5, which is appeals. You have it on page 13 and 14 from the officers. Does anybody wish to comment on the appeals? No one wishes to comment on the appeals. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to the planning applications, of which there are 2. And as I said, we will have 5 speakers for the first item, 1 speaker for the second item. The first item, agenda item 6, is demolition of dwelling and erection of 2-story detached 4-bedroom dwelling with attached double garage, erection of an equestrian arena and outdoor riding arena, together with parking, retention of existing stables and new equestrian facilities. This is Hobbit Storehouse Lane, North Heath, Poolborough. Would the officers kindly do the presentation? Thank you.
Okay, this application relates to land on the southern side of Storehouse Lane, and the site currently comprises a detached bungalow and an adjoining stable building. The south of the site is currently predominantly open and laid to grass, with sporadic self-seeded trees around the site edges. The site is within a countryside rural location, surrounded by open fields and wooded areas. The boundaries of the site are lined by established trees and foliage. The application seeks consent for a replacement garage and detached garage, which is shown by the red line, an open stand school to the centre of the site, which is within the green line, and an indoor riding arena and stables to the south, which is within the yellow line. So taking these in turn, the replacement dwelling and garage would be sited further north than the existing, which is shown by this dotted line. And overall, it represents a reduction in footprint. So this is the existing dwelling, which is no particular historic interest. And this is the proposed replacement dwelling, which is in the style of a chalet bungalow. And the detached double garage. There's no objection to the replacement dwelling and new garage, which would not represent a net gain of housing in the countryside location, with the design, form and scale considered appropriate to the site and locality. The remainder of the scheme comprises a equestrian training centre centred around the existing stables, the proposed sand school, and the indoor arena and stables. The existing stables, shown again in blue, would be retained in their current configuration and would be used for breeding, convalescence, and veterinary care. The outdoor sand school would be set into the existing slope of the site, with this elevation immediately beneath the plan showing the extent of lowering to the left-hand side and some fill to the right-hand side. And the indoor arena would be sited to the south and would comprise a substantial footprint and the introduction of a considerable amount of built form onto the site. So these are the elevations of the proposed riding arena, and the building would feature timber-clad elevations and profiled sheeting to the pitched roof form. So internally, the building would provide a riding arena with stables around the outer edge of the building, shown to a top, side and bottom of this plan. The indoor and outdoor arenas are of a typical size for a training yard, with the indoor arena allowing year-round training of horses, which is necessary for the type of facility being proposed by this application. The stables would be used predominantly by the applicant's horses, with the application stating that at present 23 horses are in their ownership. The proposal would not entail a general livery or riding school, but a bespoke business run by a dedicated trainer. The use would include sessions where individuals would be trained on a one-to-one basis, with no more than 5 of these sessions taking place in any given week. The use would predominantly, though, be for private purposes. The committee report notes that the applicant's intention is to provide a centre worthy of Olympic level training and the positive economic benefits which would result from the development. Overall, the level of facilities being proposed by the application is considered acceptable and commensurate to an equine competition yard. In terms of visual impact, a detailed landscaping plan has been submitted, and this allows for retention of the most visually important planting on the site, with additional planting identified around the site and also boundary enhancements. The resulting impact on landscape character is considered slight, and although the level of built form is considerable, no adverse visual impact has been identified. The existing access onto the site would be retained, with no access roads created within the site. A transport statement has been submitted with the application. This calculates likely trip generation associated with the proposed use. West Sussex Highways have reviewed this statement, confirming that additional daily trips would be minimal. On-site parking would be provided alongside the indoor arena, with the level of on-site parking proposed sufficient to meet the likely demand generated by the proposals. The applicant has confirmed that vehicles accessing the site would primarily be transit-style delivery vans, and that any larger horse boxes would be suitable for surrounding roads, including at the junction of Storehouse Lane and Gay Street Lane. Overall, there are considered to be no highway grounds to resist the application. Although a large-scale development, the nature of the equestrian use is relatively low-key, with the level of impact significantly less than would be expected for a DIY livery or riding school establishment. And as such, no unacceptable harm on amenity has been identified. The application is therefore recommended for approval as set out in the committee report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have, as I said, 5 speakers, 4 objecting and an agent. Please could we start with Mr. Mike Lang?
Councillor Donnelly, I believe that Mr. Mike Lang hasn't arrived yet. Can I suggest we take the other 2 speakers on Zoom first in the hope
yes,
that he has arrived?
Certainly will do. Could I then ask Avril Wood to speak?
Yeah.
Sorry, I can't see Avril Wood there now either.
Okay, let's try.
She was there a minute ago.
Well, I can see.
Okay, is that better?
Len Ellis Brown's name on the screen. So
yes, it's okay,
yes.
Brian. Yes, we've got.
Okay, thank you very much.
Now, yes, thank you, Avril. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay, So as a neighbour, I'm focusing on the ecology. To be clear, the proposed building is the scale of an industrial warehouse with the sand school, plus the hard standing, plus the parking, plus the new house, plus the new stable. This development will cover most of the available meadow on the 6-acre Hobbit site. How is this not overdevelopment? Since change of ownership, the ecological value of the Hobbit site has been downgraded. Through constant mowing, the delicate ecosystem of the wet meadow, developed over many decades, has been destroyed. More serious is the disappearance of a large pond, formerly the brick quarry. This has adversely affected the drainage of surrounding fields. A ditch on the west boundary drains the neighbours' ponds, Clargester and field into the ponds on Hobbit's west boundary. Where does this pond now flow? Was a licence granted to fill in the pond? Is it coincidental that the proposed arena is on this exact site? It's low-lying, so not surprising, it's very wet. Several large relevant ponds were also not surveyed. Why? There are healthy numbers of protected species, including great crested newts, which thrive in neighbouring ponds, gardens and fields. Historically, the Hobbit's habitat would have supported similar excellent biodiversity. However, the Eco Report states the site is now of low ecological value. No amount of landscaping, wildflower sowing, and now a new pond creation will mitigate the catastrophic harm done. It's like saying planting a sapling would mitigate felling a 200-year-old oak. Recent legislation ruled that such damage can't be mitigated. Given that this is such a major development, why have these items not been scrutinised? We are all custodians of our precious wildlife habitats. We cannot ignore the climate crisis. As David Attenborough says, what happens next is down to each and every one of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Is Mike Lang available yet?
Yes, I have been here. Good afternoon to you. I've lived in Storehouse Lane for 42 years. Looking at 215, there was an application for stables and accommodation for a groom, which was declined. The following year, 216, the application for stables was accepted. However, with the proviso of no further intensification of the site or no commercial enterprise. To approve this application now, I would suggest gives no credibility or consistency on the HDC decision-making process. If you look at HDPF policy 29, equestrian, it states appropriate in scale and level of activity in keeping with the location and surroundings. As stated, this is an Olympic level training centre with 27 stables and a trainer on site. Surely it is a commercial development. This is a small site. I cannot see that it can sustain this size of development. Recently, 2 applications for property development in Storehouse Lane were refused on the basis of overdevelopment, out of keeping with the neighbourhood, and bringing in more traffic, amongst other items. I can well see those people appealing against this if development of this size is accepted. We are in a very difficult period, uncertain period, and maybe 3 or 5 years' time, who knows what might happen. Surely this might then be deemed to be a brownfield site, and I can well see many property developers putting up a good cause for developing on the site. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Could we now have
Lost sound.
Len Ellis Brown?
Yes. Good afternoon. Just like to emphasise a point made by the South Downs National Park statement, as this is almost double that provided by the average commercial riding stables. Focusing on traffic, stating that there is no evidence that the development would increase accident risk is unsound and against the laws of probability. I speak as a statistician who runs a department of data scientists in central government. Traffic was assessed only on a radius of 250 metres from Storehouse Lane. Vehicles come and go from further afield, so limiting the analysis negates its relevance and is misleading. The junction of Gay Street Lane and A29 and at the same crossroads are known accident black spots. The TRIX assessment assesses similar size or smaller equestrian centres. So why has 12 trips per day rather than 24 being used? 12 journeys per day increases annual vehicle trips by 4,300. Using the TRIX figure of 24, which is probably more accurate, is 8,700. This will definitely increase the traffic in Storehouse Lane by up to 50%, and that's using ONS data. Our narrow, single track, often sunken rural lanes cannot handle this level of increase. Storehouse Lane, at its narrowest, the road is less than 8 feet wide. At that point, there is a ditch on one side with a drop of over 10 feet. On the other side is a ditch with a drop of more than 8 feet. There is no dedicated parking highway designated passing lanes. There's no footpath, there's no lights, street lights. Many vehicles, large vehicles, will be unable to access via the low railway bridge in Gay Street Lane. They would have to take a long detour through Nutbourne, Gay Street, West Chiltington, probably Storrington. And was the impact on these communities' roads considered? And was it discussed with those communities? It will impact public use of several public right-of-ways and footpaths with its volume of traffic crossing them. And it will impact safety. Rossborough states that 60% of traffic fatalities are on rural roads. Even if we were to cut the traffic speed on these roads by 40%, the risk of surviving being hit by a car would be 50%. An increase in journeys increases the probability of an accident. Has Highways considered increased cost of maintaining the lanes resulting from additional traffic and size and volume of those vehicles, up to 7.5 tonnes? We also ask how the council proposed to enforce such a large number of conditions. This application is full of anomalies and contradictions. So to sum up, it's a commercial scale of overdevelopment, unsustainable and unsuitable for the site. The planning application must be considered on the site, not anything to do with ownership or the surrounding fields. The site has been ecologically damaged in preparation. We heard about that just a few moments ago. And resulting traffic will adversely affect the enjoyment, amenity and safety of the public. The very thing our government wants us to be doing. More walking, more cycling, more riding, and more enjoyment of our countryside. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ellis-Brown. Could we now have a video from Nick Antonio, who is the agent?
Dear members, as you're aware, the application before you is a resubmission of one submitted this time last year. Before withdrawing that earlier application, we awaited confirmation from your own equestrian consultants, RAC, that the proposed facilities being sought were acceptable, and they confirmed that the need and principle of development was duly satisfied. The only reason the application was withdrawn was to commission further reports across all relevant disciplines. The resubmission before you has landscaping, ecology, drainage, highway, sustainability, lighting, planning, indeed a full suite of reports across all subject areas, and there are no objections from any consultees. It therefore follows that the recommendation from your officers has remained consistent from the outset and is one of permission. Turning to the facilities before you, these are of Olympic standard, and Andrew Gould will live on site as the manager trainer in the replacement dwelling. He is a highly renowned GB rider and is expected to represent the UK at the next Olympics. As well as training his horses and those of the applicants, Mr. Gould will also train up-and-coming GB riders. This is a very low intensity, very high end specialist training facility in a secluded location. It is not your average riding school or livery yard. Movements into and out of the site are extremely limited, given that the applicants and trainer effectively live on site, with only a few training sessions being offered, confirmed by the planning conditions on the agenda. Any objections have been answered by the professional reports before you, or concerns controlled by condition. Your officers have fully understood the uniqueness of the proposal before you, and throughout the committee report support the proposal in all areas subject to conditions providing peace of mind. I would likewise urge members to support this application and allow Olympic standard training facilities to be provided within the district. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the last speaker is the chairman of Poole Parish Council, Councillor Ian Hare, who's objecting. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Committee South. I apologise for being unable to attend in person this afternoon and submit this film instead, representing the views of Poole Parish Council. The summary reasons for our recommending rejection of this application are in your report that has been circulated for this meeting. They are succinctly, firstly, overdevelopment. Secondly, that the development will be out of character with the area, that there is inadequate road access, and that access onto the A29 is dangerous. Drilling into the detail of the report and the application in some more detail, I'd like to point out that the size and the scale of this development is 21 stables and a hay store, representing a building with the dimensions of 67 metres by 36 metres. This is a substantial building and it is commercial in nature. I realise that the Planning Committee report talks about mitigating circumstances in terms of the use of the amenity, but it doesn't take much imagination to realise that with small changes, this could be livery stables for 21 horses with access from 21 separate horse boxes on a frequent basis. Some of the detail in the report I'd like to attend to. Firstly, clause 6.49 refers to Storehouse Lane itself, and it refers to the narrow nature of Storehouse Lane, and that there are clear amenity and highway safety issues that would potentially arise from a more intensive commercial operation of the site. I can assure you, if you drive down Storehouse Lane, it is an extremely narrow lane, and we're also concerned that this proposed development is at the very end of Storehouse Lane, with all of the implications that that entails. Moving on to another clause, 6.48, relates to concerns relating to highway safety and access from the A29, and that these are acknowledged. The report notes that numerous accidents have occurred on or nearby the junction of Gay Street and Stane Street, as in the A29. It goes without saying that an increased incidence of horse boxes and horse trailers accessing the A29 from that junction will be an increase in the traffic hazard. Final thing I'd like to comment on in respect to the report is clauses 6.52 to 6.57. These relate to ecology and drainage. What concerns me slightly on these comments is the fact that there is no reference to wastage. And in terms of wastage, I refer specifically in this instance to horse manure. From some checks that I've made, I understand that one horse can be responsible for up to 9 tons of manure per annum. What that means is that 21 horses, and we've been told in the report that all stables are likely to be occupied, 21 horses would result in 189 tons of manure per annum. How that will be dealt with is not clear at all from the report. So in summary, I will just summarise again the Pulborough Parish Council reasons for objection, which are overdevelopment, out of character with the area, inadequate road access, and that the access onto the A29 is acknowledged as being extremely dangerous. So we, as Pulborough Parish Council, would recommend rejection of this application. Thank you for your time this afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Hare. Would the officers please comment on the remarks by the public speakers?
Yeah, just to pick up on, I think, what the key issues were. In terms of the scale of the development, I think the report clearly does have to acknowledge that the indoor riding arena is a substantial addition to the site. But what it's trying to do is also consider that scale in itself isn't an indicator of harm. And the report sets out the landscape impact, the location of the site in terms of the boundary treatments, what can be done to enhance those treatments, and reaches the on-balance view that the resulting visual harm isn't so significant as to warrant a refusal of permission. In terms of ecology, some things can happen to a site which clearly don't need planning permission, and that includes maintenance of grass, mowing of grass, and even some groundworks to ponds. As part of this application, we have had ecological assessments be submitted, which, although concluding that the site is of low value, has noted the presence of protected species on the site, and those protected species will be protected and mitigated during development, with conditions 3, 4, 10, 11 and 24 all imposed specifically to make sure ecology is properly considered and addressed. In terms of drainage, there was a drainage statement with the application which has been reviewed by the drainage engineer, and again condition 7 seeks to ensure that the site is properly drained. In terms of the nature of the application, it is primarily, again, for training and breeding purposes, not for visiting horse boxes or significant numbers of visiting riders or members of the public. So the transport statement and highway comments take that into account in assessing the likely trip generation and the impact on surrounding highways, reaching a conclusion that the impact is acceptable. In terms of the recommendation itself, the number of conditions within the report isn't particularly uncommon. All the conditions are considered to meet the relevant tests, including enforceability. And these conditions also include a restriction on the nature of the use that can take place on the site, which is condition 18. And there's also a condition for details of disposal of stable waste to mitigate potential future problems from that. So on the whole, the recommendation is for approval.
Thank you very much. We'll now move on to hearing representations from the ward members. I'll start with the Cabinet Member for the Economy and Finance, Councillor Clark.
Thank you. When I first saw this application, I thought that, hey, this is a pretty good opportunity, would bring a lot of kudos for the Horsham district and would provide some employment to the area. And I thought, wow, this is pretty progressive looking. I assume you can hear me, yes? All right. Essentially, having gone on the site and knowing the site quite well, I then had other matters that then basically made me think twice about it. So wearing purely a cabinet member hat in economic development and employment, I thought this was a pretty good thing. But the problem, as far as I see it, there are a number of problems with the site that make me think twice about it and remain unconvinced, basically. The first thing I have is concern over the statements in the report of the officers that it's for private use, but then it's for commercial use. And then condition 18 is meant to limit the commercial use. So the report for me was a bit confusing and unclear, because if you read paragraph 1.1, 6.5, and then condition 18, it's ambiguous, and I'm not clear how to prevent, or whether condition 18 would actually prevent the commercial use of this facility, which in theory should be private, because it says it's private, but then it says it's commercial. So that's my first issue. The officers acknowledge in the report, essentially in items 6.19, that essentially it's a very big facility. Now, I have absolutely no problem with knocking down the original house and replacing the original house. No problem with that. I don't even have a problem with the size of the sand school, even though it's humongous, but you know, sand schools don't do any damage to anybody. But if I look at the scale of the facility of the building with the indoor arena, whilst I like the thought of the indoor arena and I think it could be quite exciting as a development, when I look at the scale of the facility and I look under policy 29, 6.1, paragraph 6.10, basically for me, there is no good design on this building. Now you could say maybe there shouldn't be, but for me, it looks horrible. And there is no design mitigation to try and make it acceptable. It's just a shed or an industrial unit, more akin to being in the middle of an industrial park. So I think there is a breach of some of our policies with this building, which I don't see how you can mitigate, but you know, if officers can come up with mitigation, that would be great. And officers do acknowledge it's unattractive. I have a question about the number of trips and traffic generation, etc. Because when I read paragraph 6.15, 6.17, and then look at condition 18 again, and I look at the detail, when up to 5 horses at a time are going to be exercised, you look at the number of people who are going to be on site, I can easily see more than 12 trips a day. That's without deliveries and other bits and pieces taking place at the site. So I do have some questions about the trip data and the density of the traffic, but let's face it, it's not that dense, so maybe one can live with that. But envisage in your mind's eye the peace sign, you know, the triangular peace sign, the upside down Y. Think of this development being in the middle of the junction of the 3 bits, right? The tall bit going up straight of the peace sign is basically the road up to the A29. That has a restriction on the railway bridge of 12 foot 3 inches. Most vehicles can fit under that, but you and I both know that large horse transporters cannot. Fine. If you look at the applicant's transport statement, basically they then say it can come in from the south. But the problem is, if you look at both legs of the peace sign heading down, there are 6'6" width restrictions on both of those roads. So therefore, bringing in large vehicles up those roads is, for me, a problem. So accessibility to the site is questionable, and this is a problem with desk studies. If you don't drive around the roads, you don't actually know what they're like. The applicant's transport study said, oh, but that's not a problem. You can actually go down Gay Street Lane, you can then turn up Gay Street, and then access Adversane Lane. Well, unless you drive a Land Rover, good luck on that, because it's a dirt track and you can't actually get up there with a horse box. So the transport statement by the applicant is erroneous. There are mistakes in it. So those are my main concerns with it. And finally, also, how does the construction equipment get on site? Now, we have a condition in there, which I think is very good, but I do have concerns about bulldozers and earth moving equipment getting up there because it's a 6'6" wide road and it's very narrow. I hope the officer's condition is watertight. And those are my concerns with the site. So I want to listen to what other members have to say, because at this point in time, I am not convinced that I can support it. Thank you.
Thank you. I should note for the record, and I say thanks to Officer Hermitage, who did very kindly meet all the local ward members on the site, and we had an extensive discussion with him and a good walk around the site. And I thank him for bringing us out there in a cold, drizzly day. It was quite nice. Right, let's now hear from the ward member, the Vice Chairman of the Standards Committee, Councillor van der Kloeg.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just say that I realised when Councillor Ian Hare started to speak that I do know him, because he's the chairman of Pulborough Parish Council, and I attend Pulborough Parish Council meetings as it's one of the parish councils in my ward. So I thought I should just mention that.
Yes, well, all ward members do have contact with all their parish councils, so that's always taken as a given. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. With this application has come before the planning committee because of the number of local objections, and one can understand that, because what is proposed is a considerable intensification of the current equestrian use by a business which is called Priory Dressage, which I gather from the design and access statement of the applicant wants to relocate from equestrian facilities that it's renting at the moment in Rusper to this site, which is the applicant's, next to the applicant's residence. So it'd be very convenient for the applicants. And Priory Dressage is a business operated by their head trainer, whose name is Andrew Gould, for the training and breeding of dressage horses. And the site, as we know, is outside the built-up area boundary in the open countryside. Now, like my fellow member, ward member, Paul, I've got no problem with the replacement dwelling. I know that there is some criticism in some quarters that it's not environmentally sound to replace a house, which may be perfectly satisfactory as it is. But, and I do agree that we should not be throwing things out and replacing them unnecessarily. But the house appears to date from the 1960s. It's rambling and unappealing in appearance, and it's been extended over the years. And the proposed replacement will have a smaller footprint, be more attractive in design, and very importantly, it would be built to modern environmental standards. So I don't have a problem with that particular proposal. And that I think is a house that's going to be proposed to be lived in by the head trainer. As regards the equestrian building and sand school, these are, as we've seen, on a very large scale. The arena building is 36 meters by 67 meters wide, or long, I should say. Now, we've heard from from Paul, who's the cabinet member for the economic development, and there's reference in the report to our policy 10, which encourages rural economic development and enterprise in order to generate employment opportunities, provided it maintains the quality and character of the area. And we're told there would be a head trainer and up to 4 members of staff. And the report also refers to policy 29, which supports equestrian development, as it is important to the rural economy of the district, but it needs to be appropriate in scale and level of activity and in keeping with its location and surroundings. So what exactly what is the landscape here? Well, it is grassed and lightly wooded. Horsham's senior landscape architect, describes the landscape character as typified by the pattern of small-scale pasture fields enclosed by frequent hedges and copses. Now, in his report in September 2020, he said that he doesn't have immediate concerns about the replacement dwelling and the sand school, but the scale and mass of the indoor riding school will introduce a large, incongruous building into the landscape, and that this cumulatively with the existing buildings is likely to result in harm to the landscape character and visual amenity of the area. And he says he'd prefer it to be smaller, particularly in length. That's the 67 meters length. But he understands from Reading agricultural consultants who we instructed, that's Horsham District Council instructed, that the proposed size is appropriate for the equestrian needs of the holding and the business priory dressage. So he says there's a balance to be achieved between need and landscape harm. And after he's seen the master plan of the landscaping, he says that his initial concerns have been addressed. Well, as you said, Chairman, we did visit the site and we could see that the building and sand school would sit in a naturally lower lying area of the landscape and cut partially into it. And it is surrounded by trees and vegetation, which hopefully would remain to obscure and soften views into the site. And there is a planting condition, which is condition 15. And the neighbouring properties seem to be far enough away for there to be no danger of overshadowing or loss of amenity to them from the closeness to the buildings. However, the proposed building is massive, and as we've seen from the plan, it would fill the site. As regards the level of activity generated by the development, we're told from the design and access statement of the applicant that the equestrian facilities will be developed into a world-class equestrian enterprise to breed and train exceptional horses and to allow a small number of people to attend training days. And it says that equestrian businesses of this type normally have specialist livery where the owners don't ride the horses, but they're used for world level competitions. And the head trainer currently cares for 6 such horses on full livery where the owners live in London. And I assume the intention is to bring those horses onto the site. I do want to just come back to the level of activity and the traffic, but if I could just touch on climate change, because that is something that's very important for this planning committee to consider to ensure that future development doesn't impact and worsen climate change. At paragraph 6.63 of the report, if we could just turn to that, we have a list of all the measures that the applicants in their sustainability statement have promised to include to address climate change. And in the next paragraph at 6.64, the report says that officers are satisfied that the above listed measures could be put in place to mitigate against any potential sustainability impacts and can be secured by way of planning condition. However, when I looked at the conditions in the report, the only ones that I could find covered were ones relating to water usage and broadband infrastructure. So I think it's important that if permission were to be granted, that the other measures should be appropriately secured by condition, which the report says can be done, but which I don't think have been done at the moment. Turning back to the traffic issue, we've been told by the officer's report that the junction at the A29 and Gay Street Lane is dangerous. There have been quite a few accidents logged there, but the Highways Department at West Sussex County Council don't consider that that will create adverse harm to the highway network. The one issue that hasn't been dealt with in the officer's report is the point mentioned by Paul in his submissions that there is this railway bridge that has to be passed under by vehicles leaving the A29 and going along Gay Street, and that has a clearance of 12 foot 3 inches, which is clearly signed as you enter the road. And it is admitted by West Sussex County Council in one of the documents that's on the website, and also by the applicants in their in their document, one of their documents, the transport statement, that there are horse boxes which are higher than 12 foot 3 inches, so they would not be able to get under the bridge. And as Paul also explained, West Sussex County Council don't go on to grapple with the issue of how they would get into the site, but the applicant's transport statement attempts to deal with that, but is incorrect because it says you can go along Gay Street and get into Adversane Lane, and there from you go along to the A29. But I went along to look at this myself yesterday, and Gay Street is a no-through road, and I drove along till I got to a gate which went completely across the road and said private. So you can't proceed along Gay Street into Adversane Lane and get to the A29 that way. So the only option is for large vehicles to drive through Nutbourne Village along Nutbourne Lane, which is a very narrow single track lane with ditches either side, and it has a 6 foot 6 inch pinch point at one point, which is also clearly signposted when you turn off the A29. So I'm not quite sure how very large vehicles will be able to access from that route either.
Can you bring it to a close, Councillor van der Kloot?
Just about to. I was just going to say, you're probably wondering what conclusion I'm coming to on this, and I must say I find it, just like Paul, very, very difficult. And I am on rather a knife edge about it, really. I am concerned about the size and scale of the buildings on the landscape. I'm concerned about the very large horse transporters, how they're going to negotiate the narrow lanes. And I'm very confused as to the use of the site, whether it is really for private recreational use, as is described in condition 18, or whether, which is what I think it really is for business commercial use. They are completely different. They are incompatible. And I do need to know what the use is in order to apply the correct policies, because if it is business commercial use, then you're looking at certain paragraphs in the National Planning Policy Framework, 80, 83 and 84, to do with encouraging rural businesses. And if it's not, if it's just recreational use, then you're not looking at those policies. So I'm finding it very difficult to know what I should be doing here, and I find it, I'm not happy about it at all. So I think also, whatever we decide the use is, I think we need to decide whether the benefits of the use outweigh the harm, which I think there will be to the local amenity. So I'm very interested to hear what other councillors think about it, but I'm a bit undecided at the moment, but probably inclined against it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do officers wish to respond to ward members at this stage or after other speakers?
If you're happy, I'll come back in now to try and address some of the concerns that have been raised. Thank you. In terms of the use of the site, condition 18 is trying to restrict it to what is being proposed, which is arguably quite a difficult thing to do, perhaps, because there are elements of a commercial use being proposed quite clearly in terms of the breeding and the limited livery, but overall it's a low-key private enterprise. So it's not in a matter of riding the school or the where you're expecting multiple comings and goings on a daily basis associated with each individual horse. What we're looking at is an enterprise where the head trainer and up to 4 members of staff are responsible for all the horses on the site at any given time. And because of that, that arrangement results in fewer trips to and from the site and a lesser transport impact than would otherwise result. I think there is clear potential to amend the wording of condition 18 to better reflect what's being proposed by the application and what's being considered in the report, which is an equestrian facility with commercial benefits, which would assist with the sustainable development of the rural area. So if members are minded to approve the application, we would look to amend condition 18 to make it more robust and reflect what's being proposed. In terms of climate change and the conditions in the recommendation, apologies, there is a condition missing for electric charging points, which again would have to be addressed were members minded to approve. And in terms of access by vehicles, since a transport statement was submitted and following the site visit, the applicant has confirmed that the horse transportation used in connection with the enterprise is normally delivery van sized transporters, and obviously the same size as any grocery store van, which can easily go under the bridge raised in councillors' comments. While there is one larger lorry, this is used rarely for national or international purposes and has lowering suspension which can go under the bridge. So in short, most of the time, any movements will be in van-sized vehicles with very occasional lorry use that can go under the bridge. I appreciate that's not really firmed up on in the application, but for similar located sites where we're looking at introducing uses which might have an impact on highways, we have, for other developments, introduced conditions to secure further details of delivery and servicing management arrangements. So condition 8 deals with number, frequency and types of vehicles during construction, but we could add another condition to deal with number, frequency and types of vehicles post-construction during the operational life of a development we approved, to try and gain some control about the size of vehicles accessing the site and to make sure there's not a negative impact on the Gay Street Lane junction, which is a cause of concern. So I think there is clear potential to address some of the additional concerns that have been raised through additional conditions or by amending the conditions that have been recommended already in the report.
Thank you. Well, we now have 7 members who wish to speak, which is 8. Well, now I'm closing it off at 6. I'll call Councillor Lloyd, Wright, Blackall, Vickers, Circus and Brown. And I would like you to speak as
point of order, Mr. Chairman. Point of order. Nigel Jutt speaking. The local member spoke for over 13 minutes. Is it not fair to let other members to have a few minutes of their views put forward?
No, the ruling's been made. 6 will be allowed to speak. And I'll start with Councillor Lloyd.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, just if I may start with a question to Guy. At the briefing yesterday, we were talking about another 16 spaces. Is that correct? Parking spaces, I meant.
There's a total of 15 spaces on the site in total. And the extra spaces were informal spaces for back-to-back parking, but it's 15 formal spaces.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Basically, let me see. Yeah. My concerns are very much along the lines of Councillor Clark and Councillor van der Kloot. Paras 615, 617 state that there would be up to 5 horses in training at any one time, and that it's a private training ground. But this is a very large development as the indoor school. And I have concerns whether condition 18 as it stands will control the expansion of the site into a large commercial livery stables, with the resultant increase in traffic that will then unavoidably go onto the A29, which is a narrow lane, as we all know. Now, I understand the officers have indicated that this could be made more robust, and I would like to see that certainly happen. I also have concerns that there'll be competitions potentially staged at this yard. and again, with some resultant increase in traffic and parking. So I just wonder whether we could have a condition that would limit the numbers of vehicles on site at any one time. The impact and to the ecology and biodiversity, I think, has been addressed, I believe, by the landscape plan. And I agree that with Councillor van der Kloot that the measures to address climate change impact should be addressed in full, which I think also the officers have indicated they'll do. In 6.63, the terminology used is would include the following measures. This is on the climate change. But in 6.64, the officers use could be put in place. So I think that needs clarity to make sure that this is addressed in full within the conditions. Design, as I've said previously on other applications, is subjective, and personally I don't have any objection to the design of the building. Obviously its scale and is pretty significant within the rural landscape. But even with that, I don't personally have an objection to it. But I do have concerns, obviously, about the loss of amenity within the local area. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Right, and as I've said, if you could please keep them short now and try to introduce any new elements you see. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got some concerns about this application, although it does look very exciting, and I would like to support any business, especially if there's an Olympic or pedigree of some kudos around equestrian pedigree for the district. However, I've got some concerns around highways predominantly, ecology, drainage and sewerage, overdevelopment. But interestingly, one thing that's not been really discussed so far is the gulf of opinion between that of officers at the council, between those and the applicant, and the opinion of the parish council and the residents. So we're discussing this because of the number of objections, and I think we have to take those objections seriously and consider why. So one thing I'd like to understand from the planning team is why there's such a gulf of opinion. If I read the brief, it looks like this is a fairly low-key development, although it is confusing. It says it's private, then it says it's commercial. But it says there's pretty much not really any impact. All the statutory consultees, no objection. I do note that Southern Water have said there isn't any sewerage facilities on site. So there could be an issue there with water and sewerage. So that's something I don't think we've discussed so far. I don't know how you dispose of horse manure, but I do take that point. So there's that we haven't looked at. But the consultees have pretty much not put any objection on, yet the people actually live in the area and people that know the site, you would think this was some kind of environmental vandalism. So why is there such a huge gap, a huge gulf of opinion? So I'll just start with highways. I'll be as brief as I can. I know Gay Street Lane and Storehouse Lane very, very well. I use that junction between Staine Street and Gay Street Lane probably about 4 times a week, and I pass that Storehouse Lane junction. It's not passable, even on Gay Street Lane, to have 2 vehicles passing one another at certain points if you've got large vehicles. So if I'm in a commercial van and there's a commercial van coming the other way, you cannot pass. The other thing that's not been pointed out about the railway bridge is that it's pretty much adjacent to a 90-degree blind bend with a dip in it. So you have vehicles heading north, going downhill into a dip right under the bridge, can't see around the corner, and you've got traffic coming the other way, also accelerating down a slight incline. So that's an extremely dangerous bridge. It's an extremely dangerous junction with Staine Street, and I've seen many near misses on that junction. So I'm at a loss really to understand why there's no objection and there's no particular issue, though I do note that the officers do say that they have a concern about the junction, if I heard the comments correctly. So I've got an objection with the highways in terms of this application. In terms of the ecology, I'd like to ask the officers what's next. So if you look at this application, it's very, very exciting. It all looks fine, as we've heard everyone say, apart from this large building, which is completely out of scale with the rest of the development. I know a few equestrian centres that have a similar number of horses, around about 18 to 25, and the acreage of the site that their facilities are contained in probably 8 to 9 times the size of this one. So I can't see what such a large building is doing in this application, unless there's further plans. So I mean, I'm looking on Google Earth here, and I can see adjacent fields. So I'm interested in the comments from the residents about the damage done to ecologically sensitive areas that have downgraded this site. And if you look on Google Maps, you can see the mowing.
Councillor Brown, these points have already been covered. I mean, have you got anything new to bring?
Not about these fields, I haven't, with respect, Chair. I'm trying to understand if there's a possibility of further development to the north and northeast of this site and to the east of the site.
I don't believe that's material consideration.
Well, I'll let if we could have comment from the officers, that would be useful, because I might be minded to draw a conclusion based on if there could be further large-scale development on this site due to the ecological nature of the area. And then finally, I just wanted to make a point that's not been discussed so far around horse journeys. So we talked about, well, there won't be lots and lots of vehicle movements with horse boxes because they'll be contained on site, and it's not 21 different people bringing horses in. Well, we haven't talked about horse exercising, have we? Because if I understand correctly, the sand school's not going to be where they're exercising. There doesn't seem to be any facilities contained within the plan. So are we looking at up to 21 horses being exercised on local lanes and being on Stoolhouse Lane, or will they be 100% confined to the boundaries of this development? Because I can see, just like we have all over our rural district, and quite rightly so, we have horses being exercised daily all around our country lanes. And if you have 21 on Gay Street Lane, Nutbourne Lane or Stoolhouse Lane, I'm wondering why that's not been included in the highways assessment, and what the danger would possibly pose both to riders and pedestrians and traffic on those roads. So at this point, I think, just to sum up, I think it's a brilliant idea. It looks like it's the wrong building in the wrong place to me, but I would like to understand if there's any future probability of development on this site, and also why there's such a big gulf in opinion between the officers and the residents and the parish council. Thank you.
Before I go to head of development, I think most of us often see there is a big gap between Horsham's recommendation on an application, and so that's not a surprising scenario. Head of development.
Thank you, Chairman. I think you're quite correct there. You know, with large scale development, we do often see a number of objections, but and of course we do need to consider the details within them.
Could I just clarify, because it seems that the Chairman's misunderstood my comment. I want to know why there's a gap in terms of the conclusions that we've come to, both the consultees and the conclusion on the application itself, which seems to completely contradict what we're being told by people that know the site intimately. Thank you.
Clearly, we have to assess it in accordance with our policies and national planning policies. Not comments necessarily, you know, assessing it on that basis. I'm not saying that some aren't, but that's the basis for officers' assessment. I don't think there is a gulf in the fact that it is a large development, and so, but I think it's how you assess that large development. And as my colleague mentioned at the beginning, just because something is large does not necessarily then automatically equate to it being unacceptable. that, you know, this is an unbalanced decision, but that's taken into account the particular nature of the scheme, which, as we said, we can further consider through condition 18, and the particular landscape aspects of the scheme. So I think there are particular reasons why officers have considered this to be acceptable despite its scale. So, you know, I can't comment entirely why there is a difference, but I can explain what the officer's position is on it. Details of ecology are set out in condition 24, that there have been studies carried out and further work for them to do if permission is granted. In terms of future development, it's not something we can consider as part of this application. You know, the applicant may or may not have plans for further applications. This is approved. That's not what's before us, and we must not consider that as part of our assessment. We must consider what's before us. Obviously, a number of concerns have been raised with regard to condition 18 and with regard to the environmental enhancements set out in the report. You know, if members were so inclined, there could be an option to delegate approval in consultation with local members to further look at those conditions to see whether there's any amendments that we can make, and I think there is, to try and address some of the concerns that have been raised. Thank you.
And Councillor Brown, thank you for your very good comments. The question you did also raise, of course, was the vehicle movements and the role of highways. I think you probably know by now highways as the statutory authority in these matters. If they have no objection, if ever we're caught up at appeal, the planning inspectorate in most cases will follow the line that the local highways authority says. Right, if we can now move a wee bit brisker, and as I say, please let's no longer sort of harp on what's been said now several times. Councillor Serkis, the Cabinet Member for the Environment.
Thank you, Chairman. Few comments. The applicants, as I understand it, have a commercial background, an entrepreneurial background. So I think what is clear to me is that this is actually going to be fundamentally for business and commercial use. And I think we have to approach it on that basis. The second point is that the agent said there were no objections from consultees. Well, there were objections from consultees because the parish council was a consultee and the residents were consultees. What we have here is a situation that we have so frequently where there is a difference between what county highways say on the basis of desk research, and for the vast majority of cases it is desk research, and what residents and local councillors know from their knowledge of the actual site. And that's why, if I can answer the question that was asked earlier, it's one of the reasons why there's a dichotomy between what that particular statutory consultee says and what the residents say. I know from my experience in the previous local authority in Surrey, where we had a case where we concluded that on highways grounds, an application raised serious issues of safety. We stuck by our guns, it went to appeal, the inspector agreed with us and did not agree with county highways. So I think on this issue, we should use our own judgment rather than rely on desk research. Because the thing is, if this goes to appeal, the inspector will actually visit the site and can see for himself or herself just what a very narrow and dangerous road this is. It's far more narrow and dangerous. I live in a single track road in West Chiltington, and frankly, it's a motorway compared with Storehouse Lane. So I think we should stick by our knowledge of the road network in this locality, and for that reason alone, and there are other reasons that have been touched on by other members, I think we should refuse this application.
Thank you. Does the Head of Development wish to come back again? I see your hand raised.
Sorry, Chair, just quickly. you know, members will know how tricky it is to refuse an application on highways terms if you haven't got the support of the county engineer. If members were to do so, you would need to have clear evidence that can demonstrate the highway harm. And just to remind you, the test in the MPPF is that there must be a severe impact on highway safety in order to refuse an application. Without such evidence, I think you'd be in a very, very difficult position at appeal. Thank you.
Just to amplify that point, and sorry, I tell members something I'm sure they all know, and it's a bit gory, but the main factor that highways use, as I understand it, is serious injury and deaths. As I say, it's a bit gory, but that's a major measurement they often use. But Councillor Circus was making some good points there, and I thank him for those. Councillor Blackhall.
Thank you, Chairman. I promise not to take very much time, but I think there's a general point here, because we do keep coming back to this in rural developments. What are we going to do with areas which have been one use and another, and there is in this whole area a lot of livery stables? Every time I go up there, which is relatively frequently, you go past horses being exercised in the lanes. Yes, the roads are difficult, and I wouldn't disagree with that. You know, it's a nightmare on occasions. But I would say, in generally, this is an opportunity for a major development, which is going to bring employment, is going to be hopefully quite prestigious if they lives up to the aspirations of the applicant, and that you know, we do have to, I think, embrace these developments, because otherwise, what are we going to do with large sections of the countryside? And I'll just leave it at that, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chairman. Very quick question for Head of Development. It says the Reading Agricultural Consultants, they say the overall proposed replacement dwelling, outdoor arena or indoor arena with facilities are an appropriate size. Now, when they say appropriate size, are they saying an appropriate size for the location, an appropriate size for the business, an appropriate size for their purposes? What do they mean when they say appropriate size?
Would you mind responding to that one?
Yeah, so they're saying it's an appropriate size in relation to the intended use. They're not assessing landscape impact or amenity impacts. It's literally whether it's suitable for the intended use.
And just to be clear, are we saying that this then is a business and not for private use? Because we're saying that it's an appropriate size for the size of their business.
The intention is for a private equestrian facility with elements of commercial use, which is the training sessions to individuals.
No, I think what we're saying is this is actually a commercial enterprise, and that's what Reading Agricultural Consultants have come back and said that this, for its commercial use, is an appropriate size. And I'm actually genuinely shocked that this has been put forward as no objection. The idea that they're going to have 5 sessions a week that have 15 parking spaces is mad. The idea that they're going to have 24 horses there, but there's going to be one person to look after them all. I can tell you right now how much work it is to look after a horse, and it's not going to be looked after by one person. There are going to be several people working there, which has not been taken into account in any of the journeys.
It has.
Hang on, stop it. No interruptions, please.
You wouldn't build an agricultural barn there, and you definitely wouldn't build houses on that side of that of those stables and that indoor school. So I mean, I'm going to be objecting to this application. I genuinely am.
Thank you. And I noted that you wish to get away by 4, so if you excuse yourselves the next 5 minutes, sir. I'm sure we won't object, although we will miss you. Right, Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Chairman. I think everything that needs to be said has already been said. I support Olympic training for dressage. It's a very difficult skill, so I would welcome that in the locality. I've listened to the local members, and I'm surprised I haven't heard from you, Chairman, as you're one of the other local members there on this application. There obviously are clear concerns about the level of activity generated, and I was going to suggest we delegated this for approval subject to tightening up the conditions on environmental enhancement, but also on that regulation, the condition 18. I wasn't sure how we could actually monitor the level of activity on site and whether we can control by condition the number of vehicles there. But I was going to suggest we delegate for approval subject to enhancing those conditions. Thank you. I'm surprised we haven't heard from you as chairman, as the other local member.
Do you want to spend another half hour here?
No, thank you.
Right. I think Councillor Clark and Councillor van der Kloek said everything I would have said, and they said it exceptionally well as well. And so thus the position, I think, has been very clearly specified. Right, we've had enough of the debate, and I thank everybody. I think it was very detailed. I'm sure it covered every base very, very well. And we would now go to the vote. I don't know if the local members wish to suggest anything different other than going to the vote at the moment. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to take up the proposal by the Cabinet Member for Strategic Planning that if we can have enhanced conditions to address enhanced condition 18, that we incorporate all the conditions under paragraph 6.63 and not make them make them obligatory as in the conditions, and that we also put on a condition about the size of vehicles accessing the site. That would do much to alleviate my disquiet. So if we can, what I was going around to say is to propose an alternative motion, if that is appropriate at this stage, that we delegate for approval subject to amending a number of the conditions and then delegating it to local members, if I may, Chairman.
Do you have a seconder?
I'm happy to second that, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Do the officers wish to say anything before we go to that vote?
No, I think Councillor Clark then went on to say it was a motion. Just to say we do need to consider those environmental enhancements in the context of the requirements of our policies, but we can certainly do that as part of any delegation. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Chairman, can we just be clear, it's in consultation with the 3 local members?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Would Democratic Services care to call for the vote, please?
Right, okay, so this is to delegate to the head of development for approval in consultation with the 3 local members, so that there can be an amendment regarding conditions, particularly condition 18 and the ecology conditions, and also an additional condition regarding the size of vehicles using the site. I think that's everything. Okay. Right, so I'll do the roll call then for delegation. Councillor Blackwell.
For.
Councillor Brown.
Abstain.
Councillor Chowan.
For.
Councillor Circus.
Against.
Councillor Clark.
For.
Councillor Croker.
Against.
Councillor Daw.
For.
Councillor Donnelly.
For.
Councillor Jupp.
Against.
Councillor Lambert.
For.
Councillor Lloyd.
For.
Councillor Morgan.
For.
Councillor Noel.
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Platt.
Against.
Councillor Potts.
For.
Councillor Rowbottom.
For.
Councillor Saheed.
For.
Councillor Sanson.
For.
Councillor van der Kloot.
Against.
Councillor Vickers.
For.
And Councillor Wright.
Against.
Against was that? Sorry, yes.
Yeah, against.
Right, so that is for delegation, it's 13 for, 6 against and 2 abstentions. So the motion to delegate for approval to the head of development is passed.
Thank you very much. We'll now move on to agenda item 7, which is demolition of existing commercial storage buildings, erection of 2-bed semi-detached dwellings, townhouse farm.
Chairman,
Yes.
Nigel Jupp here. I've had my hand up for a little while. Before you start this known to me, and I think it would be inappropriate for me to take part in this particular discussion. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Jupp, could you just compare who it was that's known to you? You went mute at that point.
The applicant.
The applicant, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so this application relates to sites on the western side of Coolham Road, with the built-up area Thacum shown by the blue line to the east of the sites around here. The site currently comprises 2 buildings in the northern section of the site and 1 building in the southern section, linked by this existing access road. So these are the views of the buildings as existing. Buildings 1 and 2 are the ones at the northern end of the site, and building 3 is to the south, and building 3's bottom left picture. These existing buildings benefit from prior approval to create 4 dwelling houses within the existing buildings. So these are the elevations and floor plans which were approved as part of the prior approval. This application proposes a pair of semi-detached dwellings on the northern part of the site in place of the 4 dwellings which could be created under prior approval. So this is the proposed layout, which again, in the northern part of the site, fronting Coolham Road, with each dwelling having 2 parking spaces at the back of the site. This dashed line here shows the position of the existing buildings which benefit from the prior approval. So these are the proposed elevations of the dwellings, which include first floor accommodation partly within the roof space. And these are the proposed floor plans, which essentially comprise 2-bed dwellings. The presence of a prior approval on the site is considered to create a realistic fallback position, which makes the principle of residential housing on the site acceptable. The proposed design and scale is considered acceptable and overcomes concerns raised as part of an earlier application on the site, which was refused by committee earlier this year. The application is therefore recommended for approval as set out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 1 speaker for this. Is it Zoom or? Anyway, if they'd like to speak now. That's Tony Fowler. It's a video, that's right. And he's the applicant.
Good afternoon, councillors and members of Horsham District Council Planning Committee. My name is Tony Fowler and I am the applicant. I have owned Townhouse Farm for 21 years, it originally being an intensive pig farm of over 3,000 head, supplying manure for compost at Cheswoods, the adjoining mushroom farm. The process for composting changed and the pig farm became redundant, and with its close proximity to Thacum Old Village and many adjoining residential properties, it was possibly a blessing in disguise as the smell and pollution ceased. Rather than let the buildings become derelict, which has so often been the case within the locality, I have made use of them for simple commercial and residential purposes, providing employment and starter premises for local businesses and trades. The current application is an attempt to improve the few remaining areas and to make some reasonable beneficial use of a brownfield site. I assisted with the village plan, but my questions were never addressed when I requested consideration for this site, as the main theme by the action group compiling the plan was against any form of development. I have worked with Horsham District Council to try to address the parish's areas of concern and sincerely hope fair consideration will be given to this application by the committee, rather than have the fallback position, which will in effect double the number of residential units on the site to that which has been applied for. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do the officers wish to comment at this stage? No. Right. We'll then move on to the ward members. I could call on Councillor Blackwell.
Thank you, Chairman. I feel that this development is very much an improvement, tidying up the site, and I would urge the committee to approve this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I go to the Cabinet Member for Environment, Councillor Circus.
Thank you, Chairman. In the past, I've been concerned about development in this location because of its proximity to what is a 90-degree angle as you turn towards the on the Coolham Road towards the old the street, which is the older part of Thacombe. However, we are where we are, and given the background to this, given the fact that there's no opposition from the parish council, in all the circumstances, I think it would be right to approve this application this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do any other members wish to speak? I do not see any blue hands up, so I presume no other members.
Jack Saheed, yes. Jack
Oh,
Saheed.
so apologies, Councillor
Yes.
Said. I missed
Yes.
you. Please.
Thank
yeah.
you. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. I visited the site myself, and I can't see any problems concerning the building. I think it's a marvelous idea. It's going to fill up what I call a kind of a lunch a site, and it's going to make the place look much better than what it was before. So I would vote to go for this site. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right. I don't see any blue hands up, so I'm presuming no members wish to comment. I also presume now the officers would not wish to comment any further. Right, officers don't wish to comment any further. Therefore, I'd ask the Democratic Services Officer to kindly take the count.
Right, okay, so this is for the recommendations printed in the report to approve planning permission subject to the conditions in the report. Councillor Blackwell.
4.
Councillor Brown has had to leave. Councillor Chowan.
4.
Councillor Circus.
4.
Councillor Clark.
4.
Councillor Croker.
4.
Councillor Daw.
4.
Councillor Donnelly.
4.
Councillor Japp has also left, but as he said. Councillor Lambert.
4.
Councillor Lloyd.
4.
Councillor Morgan.
Stein.
Councillor Noel.
4.
Councillor Platt. Councillor Platt.
4.
Councillor Potts.
4.
Councillor Rowbottom.
4.
Councillor Saheed.
4.
Councillor Sampson. Thank you. Councillor van der Kloot.
4.
And Councillor Vickers.
I lost video, but I heard it all, so 4, please.
Thank you. So that's 17-4 and 1 abstention. So the motion is carried.
Thank you very much. That was remarkably brief, but then again, you know, it was Councillor Circus and friends. They're always very brief.
Not always.
To the point and very accurate. Oh, I'm glad you noticed that unfortunate slip. Right, we've got urgent business of which there's none. It just leaves me to thank all the officers for all their hard work supporting us over the past year. I'd like to also thank members for all their attendances and I think excellent debates. I think that I've always claimed that at Horsham District Council, I argue we have the largest cadre of well-trained. Otherwise, we often and most times don't agree, and we sometimes perhaps go on a little bit, but I think we do get to the point and get some great debates as a result. I would like to wish you all a very happy Christmas and New Year. What can one say with this coronavirus situation? I, like so many of us, is planning for my little granddaughter to come up for Christmas, and with this lockdown now being extended in London, and I'm, as you know, not a pessimistic person, I'm concerned that we may be all locked up again just now. But there we are. Just grin and bear it. People have been in worse situations. And at least Tesco's and St.